The Master as I Saw Him by Sister Nivedita, Chapter 8, Amarnath. It was in the course of an open-air meal in the Mughal gardens at Achabal that the Swami suddenly announced that he would go to Amarnath with the pilgrims and take his daughter with him. Within our little party, there was too much feeling of delighted congratulation for any obstacle to be put in the way of the fortunate member. And aided thus, as well as by the state officer in charge of the journey, preparation went forward for this unique experience. Kashmir seemed in those weeks to be full of pilgrims. We left Achabal and returned to our boats for final arrangements, and everywhere we saw the march of gathering hosts. It was all very quiet and orderly and picturesque. 2,000 or 3,000 people would encamp in a field and leave it before dawn with no trace of their occupation save the ashes of their cooking fires. They carried a bazaar with them, and at each halting place, the pitching of tents and opening of shops took place with incredible rapidity. Organization appeared to be instinctive. A broad street would run through the middle of one part of the camp, and here one could buy dried fruits, milk, dals, and rice. The tent of the Tehsildar, with that of the Swami on one side and my own on the other, was generally placed near some advantageous spot for the lighting of the evening fire, and thus his neighborhood tended to form a social center. The talk of sadhus. There were hundreds of monks of all the orders with their Gerua tents, some no larger than good-sized umbrella, and amongst these the Swami's influence appeared to be magnetic. The more learned of them swarmed about him at every halting place, filling his tent and remaining absorbed in conversation throughout the hours of daylight. We caught up somewhere with the pilgrimage and camped with it for that night at Pawan, a place famous for its holy springs. I can remember yet the brilliance of the lights reflected in the clear black waters of the tank that evening, and throngs of pilgrims proceeding in little groups from shrine to shrine. Mountain villages. At Pahalgam, the village of the shepherds, the camp halted for a day to keep Ekadashi. It was a beautiful little ravine flowed, for the most part with sandy islands in the pebble-worn bed of a mountain stream. The slopes about it were dark with pine trees, and over the mountain at its head was seen at sunset the moon not yet full. It was the scenery of Switzerland or Norway at their gentlest and loveliest. Here we saw the last of human dwellings, a bridge, a farmhouse with its plowed fields and a few scattered huts. And here, on a grassy knoll, when the final march began, we left the rest of our party encamped. Through scenes of indescribable beauty, 3,000 of us ascended the valleys that opened before us as we went. The first day we camped in a pine wood. The next we had passed the snow line and pitched our tents beside a frozen river. That night the great campfire was made of juniper, and the next evening at still greater heights the servants had to wander many miles in search of this scanty fuel. At last, the regular pathway came to an end, and we had to scramble up and down along goat paths on the face of steep declivities till we reached the boulder strewn gorge in which the cave of Amarnath was situated. As we ascended this, we had before us the snow peaks covered with the white veil newly fallen, and in the cave itself, in a nick never touched by sunlight, shone the great ice lingam that must have seemed to the awe-struck peasants who first came upon it like the waiting presence of God. The shrine. The Swami had observed every rite of the pilgrimage as he came along. He had told his beads, kept fasts, and bathed in the ice cold waters of 5 streams in succession, crossing the river Gravels on our second day. And now, as he entered the cave, it seemed to him as if he saw Shiva made visible before him. Amidst the buzzing, swarming noise of the pilgrim crowd and the overhead fluttering of the pigeons, he knelt and prostrated 2 or 3 times, unnoticed, and then, afraid lest emotion might overcome him, he rose and silently withdrew. He said afterwards that in these brief moments he had received from Shiva the gift of Amar, not to die until he himself had willed it. In this way, possibly was defeated or fulfilled that presentiment which had haunted him from childhood, that he would meet with death in a Shiva temple amongst the mountains. Outside the cave, there was no Brahminic exploitation of the helpless people. Amarnath is remarkable for its simplicity and closeness to nature. But the pilgrimage culminates on the great day of Rakhi Bandhan, and our wrists were tied with the red and yellow threads of that sacrament. Afterwards, we rested and had a meal on some high boulders beside the stream before returning to our tents. The Swami was full of the place. He felt that he had never been to anything so beautiful. He sat long, silent. Then he said dreamily, "I can well imagine how this cave was first discovered. A party of shepherds one summer day must have lost their flocks and wandered in here in search of them. Then, when they came home to the valleys, they told how they had suddenly come upon Mahadev. Of my master himself, in any case, a like story was true. The purity and whiteness of the ice pillar had startled and enwrapped him. The cavern had revealed itself to him as the secret of Kailash, and for the rest of his life he cherished the memory of how he had entered a mountain cave and come face to face there with the Lord himself."